Hi everyone, this is Neighbor Jay again. I figured I'd invite you guys along to watch me build a rinfasciature rocket header. This is a ball shell, and there's not a whole lot of information out there about how to spike ball shells. So I figured I'd just show you how I do it. What I'm doing here is a little bit different than what you would do for a shell like this one. I'm making a rocket header, so I'm going to be able to do a little bit different things than would normally be done for making a normal shell. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started here. Now I already loaded these two hemispheres with I think this is Heart White Strobe. It's one of my favorite strobes. It's just a white strobe, and it just always works. It's real easy to light, and it just works real good. Now, I use black powder, granulated black powder, to fill it with burst. If you think about it, a normal shell has paper pasting on it, and it has to have lift charge. And that lift charge can put a hard force onto this shell. And normally you'd have the paper pasting around it, and that would add extra reinforcement. But with the spiking method, you don't have that. You could actually, I don't know. This one's pretty hard, but you could, in theory, cause a flower pot by caving in one of these hemispheres. So rather than going the normal route and using meal coated rice hulls, I use granulated black powder. It just makes it a little bit more dense, and it just works. I suppose you could still use meal coated rice hulls on a rocket header. That would be fine. Before I do this, I normally break my paper just so that it wraps around the inside of the hemisphere a little bit easier. This isn't really a tutorial per se. This is just how I do it. I'm sure there's people out there with much better ways of doing it, but this works for me. So that side's filled. This side has my pacifier tube. I poke a hole to allow room for it. Leave a slight crown on it. Everything's held in there nice. Now, let me get this ready. It's my gum tape dispenser. Just give it a little twist. It's closed up pretty good. Okay. This dispenser is invaluable. Or indispensable. I love it. It's probably one of the best purchases I've made. Okay. Try and roll the equator a little bit just to keep everything in the correct shape. Smooth out the creases. That's no big deal. It's just to hold the shell shut. Now, one thing that's not extremely necessary, but I do because I've dialed in my burst charge on these shells, is I put a first wrap of paper on it. This is just thin paper. I think it's maybe 20, 25 pound paper. It's nothing super strong. I actually buy this stuff at Walmart. It's actually pretty high quality and rather strong. I put 4 wraps on. And I do this before my first spiking because you'll see in a little bit here. There's 4 wraps. When I wrap this around the shell, it gets all wrinkled, and it ends up working as a, it helps hold the string in place. Get that out of the way. All right, I'm going to start on this back side here. Okay, I want my paper to come just a little bit past the center of the shell. I put a little tear, and just for my reference, I'm going to mark my center, just an eyeball. All right. This is real similar to making cylinder shells. A little tear, fold it up right next to that X, and keep folding pleats right next to that X. Getting near the end here. Take the last tongue fold, and I try and tuck it underneath one of the other folds. There. And that side's done. Okay, we're going to do the exact same thing here, leave it a little bit long. It's a little too long. just about right. Little tear. Doesn't have to be a long tear. I may have made this too short. It'll work out. This is what I want. I want it to lay past the pacifier. Okay. That'll be good enough. It's just holding it temporarily until we get the spiking on. Now, the spiking, I do it in 2 steps. It's there's 2 wraps of spiking, but the first layer of spiking, I don't go pole to pole. I go from about 90 degrees off center. Basically, if you look at the shell from the side, you draw an X right through the equator. Be about here to here. And it doesn't have to be perfect. That's roughly 1.5 inches. And I just kind of draw a rough guide on both sides. Now, traditionally, normal shells are made, the spiking is wrapped pole to pole. And I don't like that because on these headers, without having a booster in them, it makes an irregular break. And I needed more reinforcement around the side. So what I'm doing is I'm going to spike it around these rings. I'll show you in just a second. Now I use my my string dry, except for the ends where I tie it on. And because there's nothing to tie to, this first portion, there's nothing to tie it to, so I just put a piece of gum tape on it and a little bit of glue, and it stays in place. This isn't how I normally spike things. I'm trying to keep everything short so I can get it on video. Normally I tie it to a tree and stand about 100 feet away and walk towards the tree as I'm using up the string. You're always going straight. You're 90 degrees to the face of the ball shell. And what I'm looking for is, as I pass this equator here, I want the string to land 1/2 inch apart from each other. every turn. One thing I forgot here, I like to keep this covered so I don't mess up the end. And if God forbid there was ever a some sort of fire or spark, I don't want this shell going off in here. That won't hurt anything. Now I'm starting to catch up to the other side. I'm only halfway done. Part of the reason I like doing the spiking dry is if I screw up, I can stop and I can move a string, straighten it out, make it look right. If I have pasted string, I can't do that, or at least I don't have as much time to do it. Oops. I'm almost done. This is where I'm finishing. This is going to be my last string here. Last string. Put a little bit of glue on the string. Cut it off. And that's the first layer. By doing it this way, it also keeps too much string from building up on the ends. It'll look nicer whenever it's finished. Oh, I just lost my string. There it is. You know what? I almost screwed up. Now I need my, it just came off, didn't it? All right. My second pasting layer is also 4 turns of 20-pound paper. Looks about right. Try and find the center. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. By squeezing this together, it keeps pulling the paper down, so I got to make sure that I have enough paper to cover the end of this. Same process as last time. Fold right up next to the center. I suppose you could get technical and say, oh, maybe it should be, since I went this direction this time, maybe I should go this direction next time. It doesn't really matter on a ball shell. I'm not sealing it up for fire. It shouldn't be exposed to lift charge. Okay. Try and tuck it under this. The tighter I make this side, the more it's going to pull down on this side. I think for this one right now, I'm just going to take a small piece of gum tape and lay it on there just to hold it. All right. So now up to this point, we have 8 layers of paper, which is actually quite a bit. That's why I only use black powder on these. See, this glue has already dried. This one I actually tie around the pacifier tube, and I don't pull it super tight. The pacifier tube isn't as resilient as a spolet, so you can't put a whole lot of force on it. And I also don't want to pull too hard on against it, because it could just fold the pacifier tube straight over. Now, what I'm doing here, I'm looking for a spot where at the equator where I can go right in the middle. That's going to set you up for the rest of the shell. Now we know that basically right about here is the center. And so that it doesn't build up too much on that center, we're going to lay this about a little over 1/4 inch away. Again, I don't wrap around this pacifier tube because it can't handle it. It's not strong enough. So each time I come around, I go